I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, we do interviews periodically on the show, and we call this segment Between Two Sterns. Well, coming between the sterns today is going to be a representative from the Virginia Maritime Association. So, Will Fediw, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. Uh, I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about all things maritime in the state of Virginia. And you have a great conference coming up. We're going to talk about that. But before we jump into anything, can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. Thanks, Sal, and thank you for having me on the show today. My name is Will Fediw. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Virginia Maritime Association. And what that is basically is the 105-year-old trade association here within the Commonwealth of Virginia that represents over 460 member companies across the maritime and supply chain spectrum. So we are a 501c6 trade association, or like a chamber of commerce. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you and your listeners kind of what we're doing today.
So, well, I was fortunate enough to go give a talk to one of the VMA's chapters, the Southern chapter, not too long ago in High Point, North Carolina. It was my first introduction to the Virginia Maritime Association, the VMA, which I'm not going to lie, when I heard VMAs previously, I had a different idea in my mind what a VMA was. But VMA here, Virginia Maritime Association, the historian in me, loves the state of Virginia for its maritime history. It's great. The Chesapeake Bay, Hampton Roads, the rivers. Absolutely a fantastic environment to be in. One of the things I wanted to talk about here with you a little bit, because I thought it was really interesting, is we both have seen what has happened over the recent past. I mean, my channel kicked off with Ever Given and the Suez, but the big one was the supply chain crisis. And I'm kind of interested in a perspective from you on the supply chain crisis. How did things like the supply chain crisis and a lot of the events we see happening right now impact the area and for the Virginia Maritime Association? Because the thing that surprised me the most when I started my channel was how integrated shipping is to shore. I mean, it is the road, the rail, the warehousing, the shippers. When I went to the VMA chapter conference down in High Point, I mean, it was furniture manufacturers. It was a diverse group that was there. So, kind of interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, like you said, is I don't think many people remember pre-COVID, right? But there was a time pre-COVID, and when we went into supply chain crisis, it started with trade war, and then we were looking at some of the congestions that happened with the Suez, with the Ever Given. But it seemed like back then, our day-to-day neighbors, our friends, they didn't know what supply chain was. They couldn't spell supply chain. But all of a sudden, when the world essentially started coming to a halt, and we were in that interesting time where I'm sure this was not you, but some people who might have been willing to fight a friendly old lady in the parking lot of Target over a roll of toilet paper or something like that, all of a sudden supply chain became really important, and people started to look into it, and politicians and elected officials really started to look into it. So we had always been here, and as you know, the supply chain had always been around. It just hadn't really received the attention that it was really due. And now you're starting to see that spotlight, if you will, really focus on our industry. And in Virginia, as you mentioned, we're the second largest port on the East Coast by tonnage, third largest in container volume. We're home to the world's largest Navy base, largest shipbuilding and ship repair complex in the United States. And right now, we're also home to the largest offshore wind project in federal waters, which is providing enough power, or will provide enough power, to power over 660,000 homes in the Hampton Roads area. So we're blessed to have lots of best-in-class maritime functions here in the Commonwealth that provides so much economic benefit to the Commonwealth, and some of the stuff that people don't realize. So in FY22, the College of William and Mary had done an economic impact study that showed that the maritime economy in the Commonwealth of Virginia provided 20% of the jobs in our state. It was 14% of the gross state product. It was over $8 billion in state and local taxes. So we like to say that Virginia means maritime, and that Virginia is a maritime economy, regardless of how much the general public really understands it or is even aware of what's happening, in their backyard.
The history in me keeps coming out on this. You have a great port down there in Hampton Roads, this great area just, beyond the Virginia Capes. And then you have these rivers that cut perpendicular from east to west into the interior. I mean, the James River, for those who don't know, Port of Richmond hauls a ton of cargo down on barges. Matter of fact, they don't even do a tractor trailer down I-64 between the James and the York River, coming through to free it up to put it on barge traffic. You've got LNG facilities. You've got, I mean, just mass amount, and the amount of coal that comes out of the Port of Virginia is just tremendous. Again, and that kind of takes us to this big kind of macro approach, because one of the things that I was really interested in was a discussion about how Virginia is really a gateway. It's a gateway for coming in to not just the area of Virginia, but into the interior of the United States. So if you look at the macro of the United States, you've got the two kind of behemoth ports to the south. You got Charleston and Savannah, and particularly to the north, you've got New York, New Jersey, and its terminal. But to me, Virginia seems to be a gateway right there to the mid-Atlantic area. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because that's talking about road, it's talking about rail, it's talking about warehousing, and it's talking about Virginia really being the key nexus to exploit this region that in some ways is difficult to get to from the maritime environment. The Great Lakes are not that easy to get into. You can't quite come up the Mississippi the way we used to do back in the day. So that kind of macro environment for the Virginia Maritime Association.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I mean, we really do view ourselves as a gateway because a lot of products are coming and going through Virginia's ports. And you mentioned it. So we have 55 different marine terminals or facilities from Richmond all the way down to the North Carolina border, utilizing the James River, the Elizabeth River, et cetera. You mentioned it. We are the largest exporter of coal in the United States. So 40% of the nation's coal is exported through 3 terminals here, one in Norfolk and 2 in Newport News, mostly metallurgical for steel production, the same steel that we need for offshore wind components, for shipbuilding and ship repair. So you kind of have that full life cycle of steel that's going through. But yes, a gateway where goods are coming in, and that's something we're really marketing in the Port of Virginia, which is the state-owned and operated port authority, and their 5 terminals on the water here do look at it as that gateway, especially when we have 2 Class 1 railroads that serve our greater port here, and about 40%, 30 to 40% of the containers that come in are actually going inland via rail. So we do have that import-export, both for container and non-containerized commodities that really do serve as a gateway into the United States, but also a gateway from the United States to the rest of the world in the export market. And as you mentioned, we're also, when you look at the 2 Capes, all the vessels that are coming into Maryland are also coming right through the 2 Capes in Virginia Beach. So lots of vessel traffic. On the Virginia side, we see the last few years, roughly 2,500 vessel calls a year on average, with a split of about 60% container volume or container vessels and about 40% non-container vessels, whether that's bulk, break bulk, LNG vessels that are going up to Cove Point in Maryland, et cetera. And really a big part for us that has equipped this entire evolution is our dredging projects. We have a saying around here that the ability to move goods begins and ends with the ability for ships to come in, right? And when we think if we didn't have either our naturally deep channels in harbor, if we didn't have some of our dredging projects, we would not have terminals and warehouse and rail and highways for trucks or importers and exporters. Later this year, we are going to complete a 55-foot dredging project, which will give us within the Norfolk Harbor and out to sea, the deepest water on the East Coast. And that has been several years in the making. Right now, with the Port of Virginia as the non-federal sponsor with the U.S. Army Corps, and organizations like us that lobby and go to bat for projects both at the state and federal level to secure state and federal funding. So that's something that we've been really proud of over the years when you look at advocacy efforts to secure in the last few years, for example, $350 million for terminal optimization, $350 million for dredging, $40 million to help to revitalize Portsmouth Marine Terminal for offshore wind, right? So very excited about the role that associations play in kind of working alongside our members in the commercial space to make these types of projects happen, which really enables that commerce to flow.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in Virginia, and especially in the Norfolk area. I sailed out of Norfolk for a long time. One of the other projects I think is absolutely crucial is the tunnel development and the construction going on there. If you've never been in the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area, you're going on tunnels underneath the rivers all the time because you've got to keep clearances through the rivers, so you don't want to put bridges over the top of them. And so everything moves via tunnels there. And again, I was there in the 90s when it was a little bit chaotic at the time. So much better now, recently up there. Plus, you're seeing better development to get into the inland transportation. Let's not forget, you're pretty close to I-95. So a big nexus to get in there. And that has changed everything, I would argue, for Virginia in many ways. That dredging down to 55 feet is huge because many ports are just at 45. Some are talking about getting to 50. But 55 is massive. And understand, even the Navy doesn't need that draft. This is talking about bulkers and larger vessels coming in, potentially even ultra-large container vessels coming into the port. We're talking about the big behemoth vessels, over 18,000 TEUs. Now that ships are routing around Africa, you can get those larger vessels coming direct from Europe via the eastern route. So, I mean, big potential here for the Port of Virginia. And I got to imagine for your members in the association, again, one of the things I think these maritime associations do that's really good is they bring together these diverse groups who by themselves don't have a voice as much and don't realize what's going on in the maritime side, on the land side, on the rail, on the road side. So all those are big. The other thing I want to talk to you about, because this is something that I've been kind of roped into, and that is talking about the VMA25. That is the International Trade Symposium you have coming up here in October. So I want to let you talk about that. We'll question your choice of host to be there in a moment, but we'll talk about VMA25.
Sure. Yeah, what's so interesting about this is, let's see, over 100 years ago, we have always celebrated an annual maritime banquet, right? It was an opportunity for the maritime industry writ large to come together and really celebrate our maritime industry here locally. Now, about 22 years ago, we decided to start adding a little bit of content onto the banquet. You know, it started with a little luncheon, and year over year, it grew to a panel, adding another speaker, into now we have a 3 full day event that's comprised of different social activities and golf events, networking mixers, a full 2-day conference, and our maritime banquet, which is now at around 1,000 attendees. So this whole aggregate of events is really, you can look at it as a compilation event for the industry, put on by the industry. And what I mean by that is every year we have a planning committee of different facets of the industry, our volunteers that come, and they're shippers and they're truckers and they're from the ocean carriers and they're in freight forwarding or warehousing or the rail space. And we get together and start talking about what topics are hot right now that we want to discuss. What kind of speakers do you want to hear from? What do you want to hear from the FMC? What do you want to hear from some of these major CEOs of the ocean carriers, et cetera? So we have built from the ground up, what I like to say lately is a conference you actually want to attend, where your colleagues are putting together the content. We do it at an affordable price so that you don't have to sell a kidney in order to come. And also we attract the same national level speakers that are at other events around the nation. We typically always have top US CEOs from the carriers, lots of CEOs and vice presidents from other major supply chain companies. FMC comes every year. That's something that's really important for us. We typically have the governor and other elected officials. And it's something that we just like to have people from the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, and really from around the rest of the country and abroad the last few years come and hang out with us for a few days in October, October 14th through 16th, where you get, you know, top leading industry experts giving you the latest intel, getting to network with decision makers, and really have that sense of connecting not only for business, but with your colleagues in a comfortable space at an affordable price. So it's a little bit of my cheesy pitch. We do love having amazing speakers that we can scrounge up, including one that we won't name. But a lot of people are very excited about it and excited to have you participate.
You scrounge deep for that one. To be clear. So what we're joking about is that Will invited me to do the interview with Commissioner Dye, one of 3 federal maritime commissioners we have left right now. Hopefully we get 2 more here soon. But it's exciting for me. I have not met Commissioner Dye. I've punched my card for all the other commissioners, but Commissioner Dye is the one I've missed every time at events. So I'm really looking forward to. I'm really happy to do it. I get to do it on Wednesday. I think it is right after the governor speaks. So it's a quick of a downhill trajectory on the conference right there with me. But I think Commissioner Dye will definitely be able to pull it up. It is an interesting. I had it up here, and I'll have the link in the show notes for everybody to take a look at. It is an amazing panel. It really is. You know, I joke about it. It's kind of looks like a TPM type style conference from the West Coast, but much more well-rounded, I would argue, because TPM tends to focus just on containers. But because of the nature of what you have, you know, in the Virginia Maritime Association, you need to bring a lot more other groups in, and a lot more social, a lot more interactive. It looks like, with the groups involved. Again, I'm going to be my first one going to. I was really particularly interested in some of the education elements, opportunities for students to attend. I think this is a great avenue for it. Looking forward to it. Anything else you want to add about the VMA? Because like I said, I will tout it all day long. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Sure. I mean, 3 things that you kind of touched on there. Budgets are tight right now. You know, we all know what's kind of going on in the shipping industry globally. So we have a discounted rate for shippers. So if you're an importer, BCO, cargo owner, et cetera, we have a rate for you, right, to make it affordable. Students, we do a lot in the K-12 space. We do a lot in the college space around maritime supply chain. So we have a student rate for seniors and juniors who are coming up in the maritime supply chain space. They can come and attend. So that's really important for us as well. And also, we're going to be providing your listeners, Sal, for this episode, a special code that we can add in later that will give them a discount as well. So if you're listening right now and this conference sounds interesting, we're going to provide a code for this episode that you can plug in and take some money off as well, just to kind of make things a little easier for you to come and check things out.
Yeah, and I'll add, Norfolk is a great area to come visit. If you haven't been into Norfolk, I love it. I mean, you name it. I mean, there's obviously the downtown region. There's Nauticus. I mean, there's just so much to do in and around the area. I always love Norfolk. I think it's a great place for venues, for conferences. It's just, I mean, there's a little bit of everything there. And getting out in the water, on the harbor, it's fantastic. Food is always good because you're getting seafood there. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great event. You touched on a couple of issues there, and I want to kind of wrap up on these, kind of issues you see really facing the Virginia Maritime Association and its component parts. And one of the things you talked about is I want to get your perspective on is workforce. Is how do we get people into this? I have to say, one of the things that I've noticed since starting the channel 4 years ago is I get commented all the time is like, how do I get into this, Sal? What are some aspects to get in this? Where do I get my degree in supply chain, or do I need a degree in supply chain? And I'm interested in your perspective, workforce, especially among the different constituents you have in the Virginia Maritime Association.
No, that's great. I'll tell you a little bit about me, really, and my story. You know, I was born in Louisiana. My father was an offshore diver with oceaneering down on the Gulf Coast, but I grew up here in Hampton Roads, and I lived in Portsmouth, and it was close enough to where, at the end of my street, I could see the inner harbor. I could see the ships. I could see the terminals. So there was a level of exposure that I was kind of familiar with what this whole maritime thing was. I wound up going to Old Dominion University and wound up through a few different degree changes. You know what that's like. Reading the newspaper in the business college, and there was this article about this brand new program. It was the School of Maritime Supply Chain Management, right? And I said, and the article was talking about, if you'd like more information, go upstairs and find out more. So I went upstairs, and there was this fledgling program that was going to really start educating folks in maritime and supply chain, and I went for it. By the way, shameless plug right now for my alma mater. ODU does have a brand new school of supply chain logistics and maritime operations, which is now an independent school. Go on their website and check it out to really start training more and more of the supply chain. But I wound up becoming an intern at the Port of Virginia at the Norfolk International Terminal as a vessel foreman. So lots of nights where I was out counting boxes coming off the ship, boxes going on, helping make sure cranes had their radios, etc., and was just getting exposed to this world. And that's really a key piece there is the exposure. After that, I went to the Coast Guard. So when I graduated, 2008 was a tricky time in the economy. So, and I'd always wanted to do some service time, but wound up doing maritime safety and security regulatory compliance as a commissioned officer. Eventually got out of that and wound up in the Gulf Coast doing liquefied natural gas export projects for Venture Global LNG, which is a major player right now. And lastly, I networked my way back to Virginia here to be part of the Maritime Association. All that to say is a lot of our industry happens behind fence lines, MTSA regulated fence lines. It happens at piers that we don't see, in warehouses that we don't have access to, right? But because I had a little bit of exposure, I had a little bit of an idea that maritime was a thing. So something that we're doing at the Maritime Association is really focusing on the exposure piece. There's a lot of training programs out there right now. A lot of them are underutilized. And there's a lot of jobs open for maritime and supply chain work, both white collar, blue collar, new collar. So what we're seeing as it's not an issue with jobs. It's not an issue with training. It's an issue with exposure, because Johnny and Susie, when they're young, they don't necessarily see the opportunity here unless they have a family member, right? Unless their mom or dad or their uncle or their aunt was at the shipyard or worked at the port terminal or worked in the warehouse or was a trucker. They just don't know. So lots of initiatives happening here where we're getting deeper into the K-12 space, working with several local schools on maritime ambassador programs where we're able to bring companies into the schools and talk to them more about what is it like to be in logistics? What is it like to work on a tugboat? What is it like to run a crane, right? Also, having tours, having employer panels that come in so that Johnny and Susie, and more importantly, mom and dad, can see that there's this life, there's this abundant life and opportunity with great paying jobs, great benefits, and tied into this whole global infrastructure that's as old as time with keeping goods coming and going. So we're really excited about that. We just hired our first workforce development director whose job is to solely focus on placing folks coming out of these training programs into positions with our member companies. And so that's another service that we're looking to provide to our members, and growing that pool of students who now see this opportunity so that as they progress through middle school, high school, college, or training school, vocational school, they already have an idea of the great life they can have in the maritime supply chain space. And then we can get them to work, which our members and a lot of your listeners desperately need.
Will, I want to end up here with any last comments or any things you want to close up our discussion with today about the Virginia Maritime Association.
Sure. I've had the unique opportunity to, I've worked for the government in the maritime space. I've worked for the private sector in the maritime space. And now I'm in the trade association space, the 501c6. I would have never imagined having been or to be involved in something like this, but I absolutely love it. And so I think my main takeaway as now a nonprofit trade association, executive or whatever you want to call it, professional, is get involved. So for all of you listening, you have lots of opportunities to get involved in trade associations, whether that's regionally or it's based on your industry subsector like trucking or freight forwarding or terminal operations. There's all these 501c6s out there that exist to really represent you. So take advantage of that, right? That aggregate voice, where if you take a bunch of companies together and you put them all together and they all have one voice, but now that collective voice can work very powerfully at the state and federal level to advocate on your behalf for better regulations, for more protection for your businesses, to make sure that certain things are covered, that you can get funding for projects, that your region or your state as a whole can grow economically. I mean, as you can imagine right now with the current political environment, we're doing a lot of work. A lot of maritime and supply chain related trade associations are communicating actively with Congress, communicating actively with our governors and our state elected officials to make sure that we're best positioning our states and our maritime economy to take advantage of things like shipbuilding and ship repair, more of that, more commerce flowing across our terminals and anywhere we can. So that's really a function of collective advocacy. You can really think of these membership dues that you pay as fractional employment. I know what it's like to pay a full-time lobbyist. We do that. It's not cheap, but it's money well spent. But when you join an association, you pay a little bit through your membership to leverage a full-time staff, to leverage our consultants and the consultants that other associations use. So yes, I'm completely biased, but get involved in your local trade associations or regional associations. It's pennies for your investment, and that ROI coming back, you just can't calculate that.
I think also the other return on investment is the communication that filters back down to those who are part of the association. One of the things that is very easy in almost any industry, especially in the shipping industry, I've noticed, is how easy it is to be siloed into your area and not be aware of what else is going on in even industries very similar to yours. So if you're a coal exporter, you may not know what's going on with containerization. You may not know what's going on with bulk material in terms of fuel or car carriers or things like that. And I think it's really important because conferences like the VMA, your regional chapters, they bring together groups of people to talk, communicate, share ideas, share concepts, and then they become kind of ambassadors for the entire industry back out. And I think, in many ways, we tend to forget a lot of things is still word of mouth. And I think it's really important to have associations like that. Will, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I am looking forward October 14th to the 16th up in Norfolk for the VMA 25. I'm very excited about it. I appreciate you coming on and talking about what the Virginia Maritime Association does to my audience. Or my audience.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure. And like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing you later, and hopefully some of your listeners. Like I said, we'll provide a special code for you. If you're anywhere within driving distance, come check it out. If you need to get on a plane, come check it out. It's going to be well worth your time and a benefit to you and your business.
Well, I appreciate it, Will. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today and watching today's episode on this Between Two Sterns. So if you're interested in this, head on over to the Virginia Maritime Association website. I'll have the links below. I'll have the link for registration for VMA 25 if you want to attend it and listen to me question Commissioner Dye. That should be a fun conversation. If you have any questions at all, hey, be sure to check it out. And the way to keep abreast of everything, very simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit that bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Until our next episode, this is Sal, signing off.